I'm not sure I deserve a seat at this table. Hang on a minute. I own this table. So the third type is the doubting imposter. They routinely pass up high-profile projects, avoid pitching for big clients, or fail to go for promotions they're completely qualified for. By holding themselves back, they trap both their own career and their business in a loop of constant stagnation. I held off writing my book for 10 years. So here's an example. One leader felt incredibly nervous about how they came across. However, after clearing the underlying patterns and triggers using Havening, everything changed. They took the role and they went on to successfully lead their organisation from a 279,000 loss to a 250,000 profit, and they're now tracking towards £500,000. Number 3, separate stories from facts. When self-doubt creeps in during a meeting, pause and ask yourself, is this thought based on solid, undeniable courtroom facts, or am I inventing a story about what they are thinking? Hello, it's your leadership coach, Estelle Reid, and host of Optimising Leader Brilliance, the place for calm, confident, and strategic leadership. Stay tuned to the end for a mini coaching and reflective practice. Find out more about my services by heading over to estellereid.com. Welcome to this mini-series on the 7 leadership saboteurs, which is based on my work coaching leaders for over 2 decades. Please relax and be easy. Most people have at least one saboteur running the show. I know I certainly had several. And there'll be moments when we get real and moments where I make light of a pattern, because our saboteurs can make us behave in some curious ways. In each episode, I'm going to share the data and show you how to recognise these patterns in yourself and others, the impact they can have, and how they create a false ceiling over your true potential. Then we'll shift gears to how we solve it and look at the science of why these habits are so difficult to break using traditional methods, but also how you can overcome this. And I'll give you 3 actionable strategies you can practice to unlock your next level of growth. So let's get started. I'm not sure I deserve a seat at this table. Hang on a minute. I own this table. So the third type is the doubting imposter. Think Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. A perfect illustration happens in The Prisoner of Azkaban. During a final exam where she faces a magical creature, do you remember, called the Boggart, a monster that instantly morphs into its victim's absolute worst fear. Now, you might expect this exceptionally talented witch to see a terrifying villain. Instead, her Boggart, or Bogart, whatever it's called, turns into Professor McGonagall, coldly telling her, "You failed everything." Hermione runs out the room in a state of absolute panic. It proves that despite being the most capable person in a year, she is plagued by the chronic pressure of coming from a non-magical Muggle background, because she feels she doesn't fully belong to the elite wizarding world. She treats a potential failed exam or public mistake as an absolute catastrophe. She's convinced it will expose her as a fraud who shouldn't be there. So I'm currently running a scorecard on each saboteur, which you can access for free via the link in my show notes, or head over to estellereid.com. It takes just 3 minutes to complete, and it will generate a customised report for you. So far, 34% of leaders completing the questionnaire experience this as their primary pattern, which means it currently sits in first place on our saboteur charts. With this pattern, the leader experiences persistent self-doubt and a chronic fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite clear, objective evidence of their competence and their achievements. If you're reflecting on the people in your personal life, this might look like someone who is visibly successful yet consistently discounts their own achievements, whether that's academic, career, or material success. And they put it all down to, oh, it's just luck. They often struggle to accept compliments, instantly brushing off any positivity. They may also feel incredibly lonely and isolated, carrying a persistent sense that they simply don't belong. This could happen in their career, their neighbourhood, their friendship group, or even within their own family. They feel like the odd one out, as though the rest of the world is in on some secret that they somehow missed, mistakenly believing that everyone else is doing just fine or doing vastly better than them. So what's the impact? This saboteur drives a deep need to belong and to feel good enough, forcing the leader to constantly prove their worth through relentless overdoing. This creates a definitive false ceiling. Not only does the resulting mental stress and anxiety push the leader directly into burnout, but it causes them to miss vital career opportunities because they don't feel worthy enough. They routinely pass up high-profile projects, avoid pitching for big clients, or fail to go for promotions they're completely qualified for. By holding themselves back, they trap both their own career and their business in a loop of constant stagnation. I mean, I held off writing my book for 10 years. So, here's an example. One leader felt incredibly nervous about how they came across, constantly fearing they'd be asked a question they couldn't answer. They felt highly intimidated by articulate colleagues at the executive table, assuming they didn't belong there, even though they had the most practical solutions. So what was the root cause of that? Well, this pattern is frequently rooted in childhood dynamics where the child felt overshadowed by siblings, or they felt like the odd one out in the family, friendship, or academic groups, that who they were was fundamentally flawed and not valued. In order to feel like they belonged, they sought access to the group membership by proving their worth to gain approval. However, often that approval never materialises, trapping the individual on a constant mission of enoughness. For the leader in the case study, they didn't feel enough because they had undiagnosed dyslexia. They couldn't understand why they were unable to read at the same level as their siblings, requiring additional help from the parent. Their older siblings made fun of them whilst they practiced reading out aloud. In that moment, the pattern of not belonging to the sibling group, constantly comparing themselves to others, always feeling behind and not feeling enough, was born. So let's talk about the science and why breaking these habits can be challenging. If you've listened to previous episodes, feel free to skip forward. But if this is your first time here, you'll definitely want to hear this. Because let's face it, if changing behaviour was easy, we'd just make the change, wouldn't we? We get stuck at some point in our career or business. We either reach a plateau, lose motivation, or hop between shiny new strategies without honing and refining what we're doing until it works. Alternatively, we hesitate to take the next step, held back by a lack of motivation or underlying anxiety about the risks of failure. This is inner stuff getting in the way of outer results. Now, when I qualified as a coach over 20 years ago, I quickly became frustrated. Leaders would identify a great strategic plan but fail to follow through. This inaction turned valuable coaching conversations into a bit of a waste of time and ultimately leaving them hitting a ceiling. That was when I began noticing the 7 leadership saboteurs, the unconscious patterns that get in the way of us reaching our next level. I realised it was no good simply having a plan. I needed to find a way to help leaders remove the self-sabotage patterns that create that false ceiling. The challenge of lasting behaviour change, your autopilot. We all know that changing a habit is challenging. The average person needs to practice a new behaviour for at least 66 days before it completely becomes automatic. This poses two distinct problems for busy leaders. Number one, the time crunch. Leaders are already overstretched and lack time required for long grueling behavioural adjustments. Just imagine for a moment if you follow the chronic harmoniser pattern, having to consciously say no 66 times before it feels natural, or picking up the phone 66 times to make that difficult call if you experience the strategic procrastinator. That requires an immense amount of pure grit and determination. Problem number two, the autopilot effect. Most of the time we operate on autopilot, remaining consciously aware of only 1% of our behaviour. The rest is handled entirely by our unconscious mind. For example, when you drive to work, do you consciously think mirror signal manoeuvre, or does your autopilot just take care of it for you? This makes it difficult to catch a behaviour we want to change, let alone actually alter it in the moment. So what's the solution? Modifying your autopilot with neuroscience. 12 years ago, I discovered a neuroscience-based technique called havening. It resets the nervous system and clears the blocks to your desired results, enabling you to break through that performance ceiling. And it works because it directly targets two distinct challenges. Number one, the time crunch. Instead of relying on 66 days of continuous conscious effort, we used focus coaching sessions, averaging around 4 sessions, to directly address and clear the root cause of the self-sabotage pattern at a neurological level. Number two, the autopilot effect is resolved. Instead of having to constantly remember to change a behaviour that is on autopilot 99% of the time, we just adjust the programming of the autopilot itself. By delinking the emotional past that created the saboteur, we remove the active trigger from your behaviour. And this creates automatic, lasting shifts in your beliefs, feelings, and workplace actions. Now, if you're naturally sceptical about this, I completely understand. I was too. And I tried so many traditional coaching and psychological techniques over the years, and I'm qualified in a lot of them, but nothing seemed to deliver permanent results. But when I personally tried to recover from my own saboteur-induced burnout, havening was the shift that worked. It is the core methodology I now use with my executive coaching frameworks. And the real beauty of this approach is it doesn't require you to rely on willpower. Instead, by working together, we clear the underlying neurological triggers. The behavioural shift will occur naturally, allowing you to simply stand back and enjoy and notice the positive changes in how you lead. So what happened to my client? They'd been stuck at a career ceiling for years, never believing they were capable of stepping up into a top role. In fact, when their boss shared that they were planning to retire and that my client had been earmarked for promotion, they simply didn't believe they were capable, and initially they declined the position. However, after clearing the underlying patterns and triggers using havening, everything changed. They took the role and they went on to successfully lead their organisation from a 279,000 loss to a 250,000 profit, and they're now tracking towards £500,000. In another case, a client cleared this exact same trigger, which resulted in a 300% fee income increase, making them the top performer in the team. Both leaders completely broke through their outdated nervous system built ceilings. Coming up, if you would prefer to take the traditional route to conquer your saboteur, I'm going to share 3 strategies you can practice. But before we do that, if you're ready to take the next step, you've got 3 options. Number one, if you want to know for sure if this pattern is your primary roadblock, take my free 7 Saboteurs scorecard. It takes just 3 minutes to get your customised leadership report. Number two, if you want to know what we do on the Optimised Leader Programme Next Level, head over to my website. Number three, you can book a free 30-minute leadership discovery call where we'll deconstruct your scorecard to trace the root causes of your current workplace triggers, reset your nervous system with a quick sample of the neuroscience technique I use, Havening, and explore future growth with a brief overview of the programme, with absolutely no hard feelings if this is not for you. Just head over to estellereid.com or the show notes to get started and access all of those things. Here are 3 strategies you can practice to overcome this saboteur. If you really want to nail this pattern, can I suggest, number 1, setting a reminder to practice. Remember, we're only 1% conscious choice. And 2, to practice for at least 66 occasions or days so that you create that neural pathway of competence that fires automatically and becomes your updated autopilot. Number 1, keep a fact-based win log. Write down 3 concrete objective achievements or positive results you delivered at the end of each week to retrain your brain to rely on data rather than feelings of inadequacy. Number 2, accept praise with a simple thank you. The next time someone compliments your work, resist the urge to minimise it or to deflect the credit. Accept it entirely with a polite thank you. Number 3, separate stories from facts. When self-doubt creeps in during a meeting, pause and ask yourself, is this thought based on solid, undeniable courtroom facts, or am I inventing a story about what they are thinking? That concludes this episode. The next episode that's up is The Constant Firefighter. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimising Leader Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.